Oi oi, alright, how's it going? I'm Grant, you're you. This is Doodle Review. We review music, all types really, but if it's got a guitar and an alternative style, we're all over it like a rash. We review an alt-rock album every couple of days, so if that's your vibe, mate, subscribe. You'll definitely hear me talk about a band you love in a matter of days, and in the meantime, you might discover something new you don't yet know that you're going to love. Today we're talking Tangk by Idols. Idols are a UK post-punk band that have been about for a while, forming around 2012 and putting out a few EPs before releasing their first album Brutalism in 2017. And at that point, after many years paying their dues, the Bristol-based band picked up steam pretty quickly, winning a ton of newcomer awards and leaving a string of dazzled audiences in the wake of their many frenzied live shows. Acclaimed albums such as Joy as an Act of Resistance and Ultra Mono would follow pretty quickly thereafter, cementing Idols' place as one of probably the most impactful British rock bands of this early part of this century. The band's breakthrough sound mixed an aggressive, dark, foreboding, often noisy style with frontman Joe Talbot's lyrics that were peppered with British colloquialisms, quotables and simple melodies that would recall Mike Skinner's The Streets as much as any other punk reference point. Many songs would be led with a gritty, short and sharp clipped bass line coupled with repetitive drums that explode into thunderous choruses while scratchy and wild guitars fill out the mid and high range. The magic though, that little X factor that caught the imagination of music fans and saw this band rise to the mainstream over acts with a similar sound like a TV Priest for instance, was Idol's overriding aesthetic. The group wields a very British lad, very macho, very blokey demeanour. They wield that to talk about very liberal, very soft, sensitive lyrical themes, and more often than not challenge, subvert or deconstruct toxic masculinity. And I mean this in the least cynical or deriding way, but I really believe a lot of the band's early success would just come from the tension of those two things. People seeing the band on like Jules Holland or on a late night TV appearance or at a festival, writing them off as some aggressive music that's not their thing, and then having their expectation completely subverted as Joe Talbot picks apart the ridiculousness of Brexit nationalism on a track like Danny Nedelko, for instance. This sound that I've just described, the catchy, angular, boneheaded noise rock music with a soft, gooey, lovey-dovey righteous centre, reached a peak, I think, on the 2020 album Ultra Mono. On this record, they'd honed their formula to a fine art, producing some of their biggest tunes with both relative hits like Grounds, Mr. Motivator and Model Village, and fan favourites like Carcinogenic and Reigns. Driven in part, I imagine, by the touring restrictions of the time period it was released in, the band actually followed up Ultra Mono really quickly with Crawler arriving in 2021. Immediately, I think on this record, produced by Kenny Beats, known mostly for his prolific hip-hop career, you could hear Talbot and co attempting to fan their sound out into some different territory. While on the whole the album actually is probably 70 to 80% fast-paced aggressive cuts, it's the darker, moodier, more expansive and atmospheric tracks like MTT 420RR, When the Lights Come On and the Beachland Ballroom that make the strongest impression and actually kind of colour my whole memory of that album in hindsight. At the time, I certainly felt like those particular songs offered a glimpse of the path the band would likely go down on future albums, and Tangk, their latest and now fifth album, has proven that assumption, I think, to be largely correct. This time, adding acclaimed Radiohead producer Nigel Godrich into the mix as well as Kenny Beats, the band really doubled down on the atmospherics and the slower, sparser arrangements with around a 50-50 split between these and the up-tempo quote-unquote rockers. What we get is an album where Idols are proudly unveiling a new sound they really love, while half-heartedly rolling out the other tracks in the style of old that they feel they have to. I've read a little bit of commentary from fans deriding this calmer, slower direction, and I totally get this feeling at a certain level because at the end of the day, no one becomes a fan of an exciting, heart-pumping rock act and goes, "Ooh, I really hope they start doing some ballads on the next one." But I do think it's important though to recognise that writing new music actually represents such a small fraction of any band's time, usually. And the new music they write doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's played in the context of the band also reproducing their old material night after night after night on tour. This is predominantly why a lot of bands start exploring new directions as their career progresses, because they actually never get the luxury of letting go of the old stuff. They're always playing it. I also think Idols are in a unique position because their core sound, the stuff that drew fans in from Brutalism up to Ultra Mono, is so rooted in a formula that was executed to precision on that latter album. Honestly, I don't think they could do another album of straight rockers like that without it sounding completely rote. And I don't mean any disrespect by the way to say their core sound is formulaic. I'm an Idols fan, but at this point they've done that thing, the model village thing, the I'm Scum thing. They've done it so well that you don't need AI to create a traditional Idols tune for you. You can do it in your head. And honestly, I think you can already hear the tiredness and the repetition starting to creep in on the big rock tunes of Tangk. The first time I heard the chorus of Gift Horse and that "look at him go" part, I was like, they've done this already, haven't they? It sounds like Idols 101, and as a result, next to some of the more unusual songs on the album, it just sounds boring. Equally, some of the big moments of big rock energy on the latter half of the album, like Jungle and Gratitude, just kind of come and go with a shrug. I enjoy the very Warren Ellis guitar tone of Jungle, but other than that, I'm just not really sure what it's offering. Likewise, Gratitude has some interesting production on the drums and cymbals, but at this point, hearing Talbot shout "Gratitude" over a driving noise rock rhythm just seems like it's been done. And that's not to say I dislike all of the higher energy tracks. I think Dancer and Hall & Oates are really fun, with the first being quite innovative in how it approaches its chorus, and the second being pretty standard Idols, but just delivered with the conviction we don't really have on the other tracks. It's a surprise to myself, as much as it might be to you watching, that it's truly the slower, more sensitive tracks that I'm most drawn to and actually love on Tangk. I feel like the band are most definitely bringing some of their most diverse influences to the forefront on these slower tracks. Idea 1 opens the album with cascading piano notes that recall Steve Reich's iconic Music for 18 Musicians, and I'm certain that the predominant bass line in Grace comes from an MIA tune. I just can't recall which one. Either way, both of those elements add a whole new dynamic to what the band can do, and Grace in particular sees Talbot's vulnerable higher upper register vocals really shine. His tender vocals are once again put up front on the incredibly dark and sparse Monolith that closes the album, which is another highlight for me, and the track eventually wraps the whole album up with a short moment of mournful, pondering saxophone that I personally wish could have gone on much longer. While these slower, more cerebral pieces are my favourite here, I definitely recognise that a whole album of these tracks just wouldn't work either, and I think that's where the challenge is now for Idols. How do they summon the high energy when needed without it feeling like a tired retread of the old stuff? For my money, one track on Tangk actually provides a partial blueprint for this, which is the track Pop Pop Pop. It's an up-tempo but interesting and engaging song, again pulling in some obvious influence from the Strokes I hear that time, but it really works. This one ultimately is my favourite on the record, so I'd be keen to hear what more in this sort of direction could sound like. This is really an album of two halves for me. Some stuff, as I've said, the more challenging, the more dynamic tracks where you can hear the band's care, enjoyment and passion, that's where my enjoyment is. But the half-hearted old school Idols retreads are where I struggle, so I'm feeling the 6.4 on this one. But I'll knock on the head. Let's it's enough about what I think about the album. Tell me if you've heard it, what do you think? Go down there, let me know in the comments. Maybe while you're doing some taps and bleeps and bloops in that section of the screen, you could hit us a subscribe. I feel like this has been pretty good, so let's continue it. Stick around, subscribe, share some thoughts, show some love, or just hurl some abuse in the comments. And there's some other stuff down there beneath this floating head, other reviews you might like, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, mate. Bye.